The wedding hall went silent in a way silence shouldn't. Not the polite pause before vows. Not the quiet after music fades. This was the kind of silence that makes your chest tighten. 2,000 guests stood under crystal chandeliers inside a private estate in Montecito, California. The ocean was visible through glass walls. Cameras hovered. Phones were already recording. White roses lined the aisle like snow. The bride's veil shimmered. The groom stood still, hands clasped, trying not to breathe too loudly. Then a voice cut through everything. "Stop the ceremony." Gasps ripped the air apart. The groom's name was Ethan Cole, a mechanic. Not the kind that works on race cars or owns a chain of garages. The kind that smells like oil even after a shower. The kind who learned to keep his head down. Ethan felt his heart slam once, hard. Not because he didn't know who spoke, but because he did. A man stepped into the aisle, tall, gray-haired, controlled, wearing a dark suit that looked like it cost more than Ethan's first apartment. Security moved, but stopped when the man raised a hand. The bride whispered, "Dad." The man's eyes never left Ethan. "I won't allow this," he said calmly. Then louder for everyone to hear. "Not until the truth is told." The guests leaned forward. The officiant froze mid-breath. The ocean outside crashed, loud and distant, like it knew something terrible was about to happen. Ethan's mouth went dry. Because this exact moment, was what he had feared since the day he met her. The billionaire father had arrived. And he was stopping the wedding. 3 years earlier. The first thing Ethan noticed wasn't the girl. It was the rain. Not a light drizzle. A cold, soaking rain that turned asphalt into mirrors and trash into rivers. Ethan pulled his hood tighter as he locked up Cole's auto, a one-bay garage off the highway outside Santa Barbara. The sign flickered. The neighborhood was the kind people passed through, not the kind they stopped in. Ethan reached into his pocket, counted the cash. $84. Enough for rent if nothing broke. Barely. That's when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong to rain or engines. A cough, weak, wet human. Ethan paused. Helping strangers was risky. He'd learned that the hard way. But the sound came again, closer this time. "Hello," he called, stepping around a stack of tires. And there she was. Collapsed near the fence, barely conscious, clothes torn and muddy, hair plastered to her face, her lips were pale, cracked, her chest rose like it had to think about it. Hey, Ethan said, kneeling. "Can you hear me?" The girl's eyes fluttered. She whispered one word. "Water." Ethan didn't think after that. He carried her inside, arms shaking, laid her on the old bench he used for parts, gave her water in tiny sips. Too much would kill her, he knew that. He'd learned from years of watching people push bodies too far. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, then. Lily. It wasn't her real name. But Ethan didn't know that yet. The secret care. Lily couldn't walk, not really. Her legs trembled when she tried to stand. Fever burned her skin. Some days she shivered so hard Ethan wrapped her in his only jacket. He wanted to take her to a hospital. She begged him not to. "They'll find me," she whispered once, eyes wild. "Please." "Who?" Ethan asked. She shook her head, tears slid into her hair. So Ethan did what poor men do when they don't have choices. He stayed. He fed her soup, rice, whatever he could afford. He slept in the garage, waking every hour to check her breathing. When customers came, he pulled the curtain and told them the bay was closed. Business dropped. Money thinned. But Lily lived. Barely. Some nights she cried in her sleep. Some nights she said sorry. Over and over. "I'm sorry," she'd whisper. "I'm sorry I'm here." Ethan never answered with words. He just fed her again. 3 weeks passed. Lily grew stronger, enough to sit up, enough to smile, small, careful smiles like she didn't trust them yet. That's when the black SUV drove by for the first time. Slow, quiet, expensive. Ethan noticed because it didn't belong. It circled once, twice. The next day a man came by the shop, clean shoes, sharp eyes. "Seen a girl?" he asked casually, young, blonde. Ethan's heart kicked. "No," he said. The man stared a second too long, then left. That night, Lily shook so badly Ethan thought she was seizing. "They're close," she whispered, "if they find me." "Who?" Ethan asked again. She looked at him, eyes full of fear and something heavier. "Please," she said, "just trust me." Ethan did. And that decision would nearly destroy him. The reveal begins. 2 weeks later, Lily collapsed again. Hard. Ethan panicked. He called an emergency clinic he knew, a small one that didn't ask too many questions. They took her in fast. That's when the convoy arrived. Black cars. Too many. Security jumped out first. Then Richard Hale stepped through the doors. Tech billionaire, media giant, political donor. A man who could move markets by clearing his throat. He spotted Lily on the gurney and fell to his knees. "My daughter," he sobbed. "Oh God, my daughter." The room froze. Ethan felt his knees weaken. "Daughter." Richard Hale wrapped Lily in his arms, crying openly. Cameras were kicked out. Doctors rushed. Security sealed the hall. Richard looked up at Ethan, tears streaking his face. "You," he said, "you kept her alive." Ethan couldn't speak. Because the girl he had been feeding in secret was the most wanted missing person in the state. And that, Richard Hale said now, standing in the aisle, is why this wedding cannot continue. Guests murmured. The bride, Claire Hale, stood frozen, eyes darting between her father and Ethan. "What are you saying?" she asked. Richard turned to the crowd. "This man," he said, pointing at Ethan, "hid my daughter." A gasp tore through the room. Phones rose higher. Ethan's stomach dropped. Richard's voice was calm, controlled, dangerous. "He kept her from authorities, from me, from help." Claire's breath shook. "Ethan!" Ethan opened his mouth. No sound came out. Because now the trap had snapped shut. Security stepped closer. The officiant backed away. Richard Hale's final words echoed through the hall. "Before I give my daughter to any man, I need to know why he chose secrecy over the law." Ethan looked at Claire, at the woman he loved, and realized the truth he protected might cost him everything. Cut to black. The silence inside the wedding hall felt heavier than the chandeliers above it. Security stood closer now, not touching, not threatening, just present enough to remind everyone that this moment mattered. Cameras were everywhere. Guests whispered behind raised hands. The ocean outside kept moving, indifferent. Claire's fingers trembled in Ethan's grasp. "Ethan," she said quietly, the word cracking, "please tell me." Ethan swallowed. His mouth tasted like metal. He looked at Richard Hale, the man whose name moved boardrooms and broke politicians, and felt the weight of 3 years' press against his chest. "I didn't hide her from you," Ethan said at last. His voice was steady, even though his heart was. "I hid her from the people who would have killed her." A murmur rolled through the room. Richard's eyes narrowed. "That's a serious accusation." "So is yours," Ethan replied softer, "but only one of us was there." The officiant cleared his throat, unsure what to do. No one looked at him. Claire stepped half a pace forward. "Dad," she said, "I need you to listen." Richard raised a hand, not to stop her, but to steady himself. I am listening. Ethan nodded once. Then let me tell it, all of it, no secrets. When I found her, Ethan began, she couldn't stand. She couldn't keep food down. She was burning with fever. Images flashed through his mind. Rain pooling at his feet, her whisper for water, the bench inside the garage. She begged me not to take her to a hospital. I asked why. She said, they'll find me. Richard frowned. She was delirious. Maybe, Ethan said, but fear doesn't fake itself like that. He turned to the guests. I didn't know who she was. I didn't know her father was a billionaire. I just knew she was dying. Claire's eyes glistened. 2 men came looking for her, Ethan continued. Clean, polite, 1 SUV. They asked questions that didn't sound like police questions. Richard's jaw tightened. Why didn't you call the authorities? Ethan met his gaze, because I'd been burned by them before. A ripple of curiosity swept the room. I was arrested once, Ethan said, years ago. Claire inhaled sharply. A few guests gasped. Richard folded his arms. For what? For a robbery I didn't commit, Ethan answered. I was working nights at a different shop. Real thieves broke in. They caught me sleeping there. No lawyer, no money. I spent weeks in a cell until the thieves were caught selling parts. He paused. My record was cleared, but the lesson stayed. Claire stared at him. Why didn't you tell me? Ethan's voice softened. Because shame doesn't leave on paperwork. The hall was quiet again, listening now, not whispering. So when men who didn't feel like police started asking about Lily, about your daughter, I trusted my gut. I kept her hidden. I fed her. I watched her breathe. Richard's expression flickered. Pain, doubt, something else. And when she collapsed again, Ethan finished, I took her to the only clinic that wouldn't ask questions. That's where you found her. Richard exhaled slowly. You should have called me. I would have, Ethan said, if I thought the call would save her. A woman stepped forward from the side aisle. She wore a tailored suit and carried herself like someone who had learned how to stand in storms. I'm Detective Maria Bennett, she said, and before this goes any further, I need to speak. The crowd tensed. Richard turned. Detective. We've been tracking the group responsible for your daughter's kidnapping, Bennett said calmly. They're professionals. They move victims. They watch patterns. Claire's breath hitched. They demanded ransom, Bennett continued. Then something changed. What? Richard asked. Your daughter stopped eating, Bennett said. She got sick. They panicked. Ethan's chest tightened. He could see Lily again, shaking, apologizing. 1 man argued, Bennett said killing her would bring heat, said a life is still a life, even if it's inconvenient. Ethan felt his knees weaken. That man, Bennett said, looking at him now, was known to them, from years ago, same yard where stolen vehicles were hidden. He refused to help them then. The room stirred. They remembered him, Bennett continued, and when your daughter became too weak, they remembered his words. She paused. They left her where they thought he might find her. The air cracked. Claire covered her mouth. Richard's hand flew to his chest. So no, Bennett said, steady. He didn't hide her from you. He protected her from them. A man near the back laughed, sharp, ugly. Convenient story. Heads turned. The man stepped into the aisle. Mid-40s, tight smile, expensive watch that looked new. My name is Caleb Moore, he said, and I don't buy it. Richard's eyes hardened. Who invited you? I represent interests that lost a lot of money when your daughter disappeared, Caleb replied. Ransom negotiations fell apart. Investors got nervous. Bennett's gaze snapped to him. You're treading thin ice. Caleb shrugged. I'm just saying this mechanic benefits either way. Plays hero, marries rich. Claire bristled. That's enough. Ethan didn't move. You're lying, he said quietly. Caleb smirked. Prove it. Bennett raised her phone. Already did. She tapped the screen. Audio filled the hall. muffled voices arguing, one voice clear enough to cut through. If we dump her near the highway, that guy will find her. He won't let her die. Caleb's smile died. Bennett turned to security. Take him. Caleb backed away. You can't. They could, and they did. As he was escorted out, his voice cracked. This isn't over. The doors shut behind him with a sound that felt final. The father's reckoning. Richard stood very still. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then he looked at Ethan, not as a billionaire, not as an accuser, but as a father who had been wrong. I searched the world, Richard said, voice rough. Private jets, task forces, rewards, and you. He swallowed. You were there every night. Ethan said nothing. Richard stepped closer. The room leaned in. I accused you, Richard said, in public. Yes, Ethan replied gently. Richard nodded once. I was wrong. He turned to the guests. I was wrong. A murmur swelled, relief or respect. Richard faced Ethan again. You didn't save my daughter with money, you saved her with time. His shoulders dropped. I owe you more than an apology. Ethan shook his head. You don't owe me anything. Richard smiled sadly. That's exactly why I do. The choice. Claire moved between them. She took Ethan's hands, steady now. You told me once, she said softly, that kindness doesn't need witnesses. Ethan nodded. She turned to her father. He never asked for anything, not once. Richard exhaled. Then I won't offer payment. He paused. I'll offer trust. The officiant cleared his throat again, hopeful. Richard looked at him. You may continue. A cheer rippled through the hall, careful at first, then stronger. But Ethan raised a hand. Wait, he said. The room froze again. Ethan turned to Claire. If you have doubts, any, this is the moment. Claire smiled through tears. I don't. He turned to Richard. If you want conditions. Richard shook his head. Only one. Ethan waited. Take care of her, Richard said, the way you already have. Ethan nodded. Always. The officiant smiled, voice shaking. We are gathered here. Ethan barely heard him. He looked at Claire, thought of the bench, the soup, the nights he counted breaths. I promise, Ethan said when it was his turn to show up, even when it's hard, especially then. Claire's voice was clear. I promise to believe you, even when the world is loud. When they were pronounced husband and wife, the hall erupted, cheers, tears, applause that rolled like thunder. Richard hugged his daughter, held Ethan's shoulder. Outside, the ocean kept crashing. This time, it sounded like approval. After, life didn't slow down. Ethan's shop expanded, not because of money, but because of trust. People came from everywhere, not for discounts, but because they believed in the man behind the wrench. Ethan still arrived early, still wore overalls, still fed anyone who needed feeding. Claire joined him on Fridays. They cooked, they served, they listened. One evening, she found the old bench in storage. This is where I sat, she said quietly. Ethan nodded, and where I learned who I was. She leaned against him. Do you ever regret it? He thought of the rain, the fear, the wedding. No, he said, I'd do it again. She smiled, so would I. Months later, a young apprentice asked Ethan why he never talks about the wedding. Ethan wiped his hands, looked out at the open bay. Because the most important moment, he said, happened when no one was watching. Sometimes the world isn't saved by power. Sometimes it's saved by a man who keeps feeding. Even when it costs him everything.